So I want to start off this week where we left off in the study last week, where I made this lovely bookcase. Now, if you remember when I put this into place, because there was a slightly raised floorboard at the edge of the room, this was standing at a bit of an angle. So what I've actually done is just sand along the bottom to make the back shorter. So if I stand that up now, you'll see that it's now sort of leaning backwards. But when I pop that into place in the room, that will now be standing straight. So to do that, all I did was hold it against my sandpaper, slightly raised at the front edge, and then you just sweep along. And I don't want to do too much more to this because I have a feeling that this is right now. But you would just sweep along until you start seeing the back edge narrow down a bit, and then you can just use a piece of sandpaper to smooth off any sort of sharp lines between the longer bit and the shorter bit, if you see what I mean. So go back like that. So let's just go and try this into place now to make sure that it is now straight. Yeah, so that is now standing straight alongside the chimney breast there. So if I come around like that, although you can see a little bit of a angle in the foot there, to the naked eye, that is just standing straight. And you're not really going to notice anything like that. I think I did that on camera before in the bedroom with the chair. Let me just show you where that back leg actually sits on the rug there. And I wanted to keep the chair at that angle. So I've taken a bit off of the back leg, and from the naked eye there, you wouldn't know that if I didn't tell you, so don't tell anybody. But things like that, you know, can work to make things stand straight, even though if you were to take them out of where you wanted to place them, it wouldn't be straight. So only ever do that if you're sure that you're going to be keeping it in that position. Obviously don't do that if you're going to be sort of moving it around into different rooms and things. But I am now very happy with that bookcase. That's standing nice and straight in there. I've made some sort of dusty marks on the floor now, so I'll clean those off. But the other thing I wanted to do today was just tidy up that plant, similar to how I did in the living room. Let me just move you across again. So if you remember, I just clipped down some of the stems and then moved the leaves down to make it look a little bit shorter and a little bit more bushy. So I've brought the bookcase back in so I can get a rough height for the plant. And I quite like it at that sort of angle. So I've got a leaf sort of overhanging the bookcase. I think that looks quite nice. And I want it probably just a little bit taller than the bookcase, but not too high. So I think if I use that as my height there and just snip that off, just below that sort of double leaf there. Oops. And then these are like really easy just to pop off like that, and then you can pop them back onto the cut branch. If the branch or stem that you're trying to put it back onto is a little bit thick, then you can just shave a little bit off. And this is sort of like a plastic covered wire, so quite easy to cut and easy to work with as well. I just want to shave that down a little bit more. Just be careful of your fingers when you're doing that. Trying to make a little bit of a point on there. There, like that. So if I leave that one and then just trim that one and that one back. Okay, so I'm going to pop one back on there, but I don't think I need another one there, so I'm just going to cut that thicker stalk off like that, and then it's just this one I need to sort. So I think I'm going to come down quite low with that one. I'll go a little bit higher. You can always cut more off, but you can't obviously stick it back on. Like that. And then again, just trim that off. And stick my leaf back on there. Like that. I'm actually not keen on just that big plain branch there. So I'm going to go and put these back in place and just see how that looks. And then if I need to trim any more off, actually that is just hitting into the side of the bookcase, so maybe I can get rid of that. Let's do it. Let's be daring. Just get rid of that one. And that will stand a lot nicer then. I think that looks quite nice. Now, because this grey pot doesn't really go in the room, what I want to do is cover it with some cord. And I really like this colour, but I haven't got one large roll of it. I've only got all of these smaller rolls. So what I'm going to do is join it on, but just make sure that my join is always at the back. And because I want my plant position like that, I'm just going to do a pencil line at the back, just so I know where I'm joining it each time, just in case. And then I can make a start. I'll lay that down as I'll knock it down again. So just start by sort of applying glue, you know, a little way up around the pot. We're going about a third of the way up there. And I can join on my cord. Put the line there. And then just start twisting it around. It's always hardest to get started, but once you've been around a few times, it gets easier. Make sure that's right around the bottom. And be prepared to get quite gluey when doing this. And just try to keep the rounds as close together as possible, because then you're not going to see through to the paint below. Keep pushing the cords together, and don't worry if you get glue on them, because it does dry clear. You can just sort of flake it off with a nail once it's dry. So once you've covered the glue, just apply a bit more and then just keep going until you get to the top. So I'm just coming back around to the back now. And as I was going around, the grey paint started coming off the pot there and sticking to my fingers and then sticking back to the cord again. So that's the grey that you can see on there, but I should just be able to scrape that off. So I've just put a little bit more glue on so I can get around to the back and then just snip that off. But I might do a plait actually to go around the top just so you can't see any of that grey. And I only actually had to join in once and my little join is there. So just sort of laid it alongside the end of the last one. Snip that off there as well. And just glue the end down. Yeah, that looks better, doesn't it, than that grey? I think I will just do a plait to hide the top of the pot. Also dropped a leaf off there, so I'll just pop that back on. And when I'm making a plait, I always measure 3 times the circumference of the pot or the box or whatever I'm making it for. And that gives you more than you'll need, but at least then you're not going to sort of come up short. It gives you room as well to sort of tie a knot at the beginning as well. So I'm just applying glue then around the top of the pot. I just want to cover that grey sort of rim. that. So again, I want to start at the back. I'll just snip that off. Just touch that there. And just lay it around. It just sort of finishes it off, I think. Just trimming that beginning bit off there where it started to unravel. And I can come around like that. Just make sure that you're not sort of pulling it too tightly anywhere before you cut it off, otherwise you might have an uncovered bit around the front. So I'll just double check it's laying nicely. And then snip. Bit more glue. And press that down. I think that looks pretty good. So it's a plan of mine for the study to actually scan in all of my full-sized books. And what I've done today is just actually started with 3 so I can show you how I do it. So open up your scanner and then lay the book on so that you can see the front cover, the spine and the back cover. So I'm going to lay that on there like that and actually press it down, as I scan it in. So I'm going to hold on to that. I'm in my Photoshop program here. Hope you can see me there. So I'm going to open up the scanner. Scan the page in. I'm going to press it down as the scanner goes across so that it gets a good clear image. Right, so let me pop this down and then I can show you what's on screen. Now, obviously this is a Adobe Photoshop tutorial because that's the program that I have on my computer. Now, I don't know if any sort of photo editing programs would be able to do this, but it might just be worth having a play around with what you've got on your computer. So that's obviously the wrong way around. So I'm just going to rotate canvas clockwise and then cut that out. And if it's not square, you can rotate that using an arbitrary degree, which I think I may have to do. No, because it's only out a tiny amount, I'm just actually going to square it off. So I'm just taking a tiny little bit of the cover away there, and then I'll bring that over like that. But obviously if you were out by quite a bit, if that was quite sort of skewed in there, then do just rotate it by a tiny degree until you get it square in there. So the height of the book then is 7 inches, but it's easier to do that in millimetres because then you can divide that easier by 12. So 177 millimetres high. If I divide that by 12, that's 14.75 millimetres, but I'm going to round that up because 1/4 of a millimetre isn't going to make much difference to the scale. So I'm going to call that 15 millimetres. So if you go into image and size, the resolution is already set to 300, and I would say that put it to a high resolution because then you're going to get more detail, and you can go higher than that as well if you wish. And then I'm going to put the height here that's set to centimetres, so 1.5 centimetres, which is 15 millimetres. And you only actually have to worry about one measurement, because as long as you've got constrain proportions selected down here, it will make it to the correct size. So it's not going to make it, you know, longer than it is high. It will keep it at that size going by your one selected measurement. So that's going 1.5 centimetres high, so it's making it 2.14 centimetres wide, and that will be in proportion. So I'll press OK. Now I'm only actually doing the one book at the moment. Actually, I could do another couple. So what I'm going to do is set up a new page, and I'm going to set up an A4 page like that, and then I pick up my drag tool and I'll put that book cover onto the A4 page like that. I'll do another few just so I'm not printing off a page with just one book on it. Okay, so I've scanned in another couple. So this one here was the same size as the first one, so that will be the 1.5 millimetres again. Oh, sorry, 1.5 centimetres. 1.5 millimetres would be a small book. And then this one was slightly taller, and that came out at 16.5 millimetres. So that's 1.65 centimetres. Okay, so I'm going to drag both of those onto my sheet. One. And then flatten image, otherwise you'll only get one of those. It won't recognise all three. And then that's ready to print. Now, obviously, to save paper, you'd want to put more than that on there. But just at the moment, I'll just do those three. And then make sure that you're set to colour printing. And I'm just going to go standard with these so it doesn't use as much ink, because I'm not sure how much coloured ink I've got left in there. So the other thing I would like to do is actually to be able to create an entire page of these and then sell those either in my Etsy shop or via a PayPal payment or something like that, and then just email you the sheet. So first of all, let me know if that is something you would be interested in. And then if you either sell printouts on Etsy or you've bought them in the past, let me know how it works as well. Because how do you then, you know, stop people from printing them and then selling them themselves? You know, is there a sort of copyright on them? And the last thing, and in fact, I'll do a bit of research on this myself, but how much do you sort of pay for an A4 sheet, or how much would you be willing to pay? And the only thing that worries me about doing it on Etsy is because their fees are so high, you've got to sort of calculate for that before you even put a price on it, you know. So that's something I'll have to do a little bit of research on. But do let me know if you've bought things like that before, you know, printables, books, or grocery packets or anything like that. I'd be interested in finding out your experience with that. So what I actually do with these then is I start by putting a piece of sellotape over each cover. And I then cut those out. So to make these up into books, and I'm sure you all know this, the width of the spine is the thickness of the piece of wood or card that you use. And then for the size, you want the height and width just of the front cover. So you can then apply glue to the back of the cover. And I'm just using the natural wood as I think that represents pages quite nicely. But you could either paint, you know, along the edges using a white or an ivory paint, or even gold, if you wanted a nice fancy book. You then stick that into the centre like that and wrap the pages round. And you don't have to add the sellotape, that obviously just gives them a nice glossy cover. But if you did want to do like an old book with a sort of matte cover, then Obviously just don't put the sellotape on. There we are. One of my favourite books, Elizabeth Jane Howard, The Light Years, also known as the Cazalet Chronicles. I think there's 5 or 6 in the set, and they're really good. If you haven't read them, I really recommend them. So The Light Years is the first in the series. Good old family saga. Another of my favourites here, Rosamund Pilcher's The Shell Seekers. And I'm a big fan of Rosamund Pilcher. In fact, I've read most of her books and her short stories. Now, she used to go under a different name. I think it was Jane something. I might be wrong there. I'll have to look that up. I'm pretty sure it's Jane Marchant or something like that. But I haven't been able to find any of the books by her under her first author's name or pen name. I'm not sure why. They're probably all out of print now, but I'd love to find some of those. Is that on the cover, or is that a bit of my nail varnish? No, I think it's part of the cover. And another really good author, Rosamund Lehman. And I've only read a couple of hers. But again, really lovely books. Like that. So 3 down, probably 300 or 400 to go. But yeah, I will try to get something done up on some sheets. So do let me know your experiences with buying printables online. And yes, that's it for today's episode. I'm going to go and pop these back into place. So I've just popped those books on top for now, as they look a little bit lost on the shelves on their own. But yeah, I really like how that looks. But like I say, that's the end of this episode. So I'll be back again next Friday. If you want to see more from me, I have a Patreon channel where I upload 3 videos a month. And at the moment I'm working on a beach-themed room box and a 1940s doll's house, and I also share a monthly tutorial, of which there are now about 84 available. So as soon as you join, you unlock every episode I've ever uploaded over there. So that's hundreds and hundreds of hours of dolls' houses and miniatures. But I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you again next week. So until then, take care. Bye.